Automated Systems Incorporated, Woodland Windows and Doors, Joe Cotton Ford, HealthInsuranceMentors.com, Crumweedy Home Pros, Tom Mirabelli, Independent Agent with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Best Dental Group of Bartlett, Charles Equipment Energy Systems, I hope they brought their punch, PJN Tax Specialists, the Rabine Group, Gary Rabine, High PSI, Craig Service Center, St. John's Northwestern Academies, Advanced Design Studio, Dixon Companies, AM Woodland Outdoor Design, Douglas Automotive, U.S. Concealed Carry Association, Express Employment Professionals, Illinois Concealed Carry Training, and Eyes Right Open. Now, before we get to our main speaker, we have a very special guest. He is the congressional representative in the U.S. House for Wisconsin's 1st District, which is where you're sitting this morning. Please give a warm welcome to a man that's been on our show too before, Congressman Brian Stile.
Welcome to the 1st Congressional District, 83 hours before the polls in the state of Wisconsin close. I got a packed agenda today. We're crisscrossing the state to make sure that everyone in the state of Wisconsin gets out and votes. We think about 60% of all the votes that are going to be cast have already been cast. But the way to think about that is that means we got 40% to go. And our folks are showing up on the day of the election. You go back a year ago, I got invited to Camp David. I sat next to Mick Mulvaney at dinner, the president's chief of staff at the time. And I said, tomorrow morning, Mick, I actually have to leave early because I got to go to a Lincoln Day dinner in Kenosha, followed by a Lincoln Day dinner in Racine, Wisconsin. He said, you're leaving Camp David early. And I said, Mick, let me tell you, I promise you this election is going to come down to a small geographic area. And in my opinion, it's going to come down to southeast Wisconsin, to the counties of Racine and Kenosha. And I'll bet you that the president is with me in one of those two counties the day before the election. I was just into the House of Representatives. He didn't know me well. He looked at me and said, Brian, you know what? The president will be with me in Kenosha at 7:30 p.m. on Monday night.
That's right.
I'm excited. You guys know the president stepped up in a big way in the community of Kenosha. As things were spiraling out of control, we were calling for the reestablishment of public safety in our community. I actually called the White House the switchboard. It's kind of like what you'd think if you call a switchboard, press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 0 for operator. It's like you're returning something in Target. I said, hey, it's Congressman Brian Stile. I represent the community of Kenosha, and I need to speak with the President of the United States. He said, Brian who? I said, Brian Stile, representative of the House of Representatives. He said, hold on a minute. I went through a couple people, and I got through one, and I got through another, and then I get an operator voice comes on and says, you're now connected. I thought, who the heck am I connected to? Maybe I made it to the next office, so I just jumped in and said, hey, this is Brian Stile. I'm in the House of Representatives. I represent the community of Kenosha. You gotta let me speak too. And he says, hello, Brian. We talked about what was going on in the community of Kenosha. He said, Brian, your governor hasn't called me. I said, Mr. President, I can't explain my governor. You can't explain your governor. We relate. And I said, but the people of Kenosha need your help. Freedom is at stake. People don't feel safe in their community. Everyone has a right to feel safe in their communities. And ultimately, as you guys know, the president stepped up, said enough is enough, helped send federal resources in the community. We reestablished public safety in the community of Kenosha to make everyone feel safe, to protect freedoms for all of us.
Yes, sir. We were there for that.
It's going to be great to have the president back in Kenosha, between Kenosha and Racine at the Kenosha Airport on Monday, where he's going to get an opportunity again to thank the men and women of law enforcement that keep our communities safe. If you think about what this election is all about, it's about freedom, which is why it's so exciting that today's event is a freedom gathering group. That's what's at stake. The polls close in 83 hours. I'm crisscrossing the state. I'm being joined by Governor Scott Walker, U.S. Senator Ron Johnson. We're going from Kenosha to Burlington to Franklin to Muskego, and then we're going to let people do some trick-or-treating, and we're going to get back out again and do it tomorrow. Because in 83 hours, I think the future of our country will be decided. And I don't know about you, but I get sick and tired of Republicans being on defense. Yep. I think Republicans need to be on offense. Yeah. And so what we're doing is we're taking these final 83 hours and going on offense and talking about things that the president has done. Talking about how he's fought for trade agreements that put the workers and farmers first. How we redid NAFTA, USMCA trade agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. We got to go on offense and talk about that. We've been punched in the face by coronavirus. We're ultimately going to defeat this virus to get our way of life back. We are. So then we got to go on offense and talk about economic prosperity, about how these abstract tax codes that were put in place actually have a real impact here in our communities. You see it in particular along the I-94 corridor. Maybe if you were driving up from the Chicagoland area as you're coming in, you see that economic growth. We saw one of the lowest unemployment rate environments we had seen in generations before we were punched in the face by coronavirus. We got to go on offense and talk about economic prosperity. We got to go on offense and talk about how we reinvest in the United States military, our Army, our Navy, our Air Force, Marine Corps, so that we can negotiate from a position of strength. When you negotiate from a position of strength, our allies like Israel can negotiate peace agreements with their former foes. You can't do that without President Trump, and you can't do that without the United States negotiating from a position of strength.
Yes, sir.
I'll leave you with this. We're 83 hours away from the polls closing in the state of Wisconsin. Freedom is on the line. And I am convinced the state of Wisconsin will be the tipping point in this election. In southeast Wisconsin, where you are today, from here to Lake Michigan, is the decision point in this entire election. So I appreciate you guys having me. I'm going to hit the road because I'm going to go out and find every single last vote to get President Trump across the line. Have an absolutely wonderful day, you guys.
Thank you. I know, right?
Before we continue, a little housekeeping measure. I know all of you have masks, right? Because out of respect from the resort, they want us to wear masks during your breakout sessions if you can. And of course, not while you're eating or drinking, but when you're walking through the hallways, they're just asking that people wear their masks. That's a fine sacrifice in order for us to be here today, right? It's all right. Okay, let's talk to you and introduce you to our sponsor for this session. It's Woodland Windows and Doors, and wanted you to know a little bit more about them, so take a look at this video.
Woodland began on some very humble beginnings. In fact, a very good friend of ours lent us an axe because we were splitting firewood. So it was myself, my two brothers, and my father were splitting firewood and selling firewood by the face cord. That was Woodland Lumber.
Mom and Dad started the company in 1969. And in 1969, they really wanted something that they can pass on to their children. They had 7 children. We were struggling at the time. My dad had a lot of millwork background, and with all that knowledge, he wanted to pass something on to his children. And as time evolved, we didn't have really clear direction as to where the company was going. But Dad really knew that he wanted to get into the window and door business.
I think there's no question in the beginning years, you're forming the foundation of the company. And the thing that was important to my father, which then became important to us, is integrity, our faith in God, and making sure that when we treat customers, we treat them like the golden rule, better than we treat ourselves.
Today, Woodland survives and thrives in the industry because it's a family feel here. We have employees that are part of the family, installers that are part of the family, and you're only as good as the people that you have around you. And we're very fortunate and blessed to have amazing people surrounding us, which only makes us better.
Woodland's approach is always quality. We think in terms of how we would want the job done in our own homes. And so we think about the right product for that customer or the right solution for the project.
I believe what makes Woodland the choice over the competitors starts with the relationship that we develop with our customers. We treat them very well. We show a lot of integrity in our sale. and we take the customer through all their questions, and we take time with them to make sure that they know what they're buying.
We sell many major brands under one roof. So when our install reps come to your home, we listen to what your wants and needs are, and then we come up with a solution to best fit that. We're not trying to force one brand into your home.
Throughout the years, Woodland has really embraced technology. We've come a long way over the last few years, from everything being on paper to moving to the digital world. From the kitchen table with the customer, being able to quote quickly, and then taking that same tool in-house and processing the order in a more timely fashion so that we can continue to meet our lead times.
I've been with Woodland Windows and Doors for 35 years, and the owners have allowed me over that period of time to now help change the company and innovate, use technology to help efficiencies for the installation process, make a better experience for the homeowner.
Well, I'm very excited to say that our third generation is in place. And what's ingrained in them is the same thing that's been ingrained in us, is to treat our customers with excellence, to make sure we're bringing the best products to our customers, and to make sure that they're installed properly. I know, in fact, that our third generation sees it as a priority and will continue to take that with energy into the future.
So the great team from Woodland Windows and Doors, they are here today and stop by their table. They would love to meet you and talk to you if you have any interest in getting work done on your home. All right, now it's an honor to introduce our first speaker of the day. He's nationally syndicated talk show host, heard on more than 350 affiliates across the country, including our station, 7 to 9 p.m. each weekday on AM 560. He's also a best-selling author of 5 books. And just this year, he was the executive producer of the #1 documentary of 2020. Who knows what that is?
Uncle Tom.
Who saw it? I watched, yes, it's great. And if you haven't seen it, they're selling DVDs outside, so you can pick up yours today. So make sure you
Totally
do
worth
that.
it.
And please give a warm Freedom Summit welcome to the sage of South Central, Larry Elder.
You know, I've just been appointed to a commission. The president asked me to join. It's called the Commission to Study the Social Status of Black Men and Boys. I've often argued that the #1 problem facing the country in general and facing the Black community in particular is the absence of fathers. 70% of Black kids today are raised without fathers in the home. It's about 50% of Hispanic kids who were raised without fathers in the home. When I was in college in 1970, 5 years before that, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a Democrat, later on became a senator to New York, wrote a booklet called The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. 25% of Black kids at that time were born outside of wedlock, a number that he thought was horrific. If we didn't do something about it, we had all sorts of bad social unintended consequences, dropouts, crime, being uneconomic, unable to compete in our economy. Fast forward, 28% of white kids are now born outside of wedlock. And nobody is even talking about what I consider to be the #1 social problem in the country. I believe with our welfare state that was launched, the war on poverty in the mid-60s by Lyndon Johnson, with the best of intentions, what we've done is we've incentivized women to marry the government. We've incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And that is why I agreed to join the commission. Now, when you agree to join the commission, you have to fill out a background check. They give you this thick background check. And so I get this thing and I have to fill it all out. And wow, have you ever been sued for sexual harassment? No. Ever been convicted of a felony? No. Ever been charged with a felony? No. Ever worked as a foreign lobbyist? No. Ever taken any money from China or from Russia? No. Have you ever done anything, which is the word were to become public would cause embarrassment to you or to the administration. What the hell do you say? So I wrote down, do you mean lately? And somehow I made it. My evolution with Donald Trump is as follows. Like a lot of you, I watched down the escalator and his speech. And what he said about Mexicans, what he said about rapists. And I knew the media was going to chew him up. It didn't matter what he said. They were going to say that he's a racist. And I knew they were going to do that. And of course, they probably did. So I said to myself, this is going to be the world's shortest presidential race. Because I figured he'd drop out within a matter of days after they just jump all over him. I figured they'd dissect his finances. I assumed that because he was involved in real estate development, had to deal with some tough people in New York, he probably had to make some deals that the average American would be offended by. And of course, most reporters don't know anything at all about taxes, about economics. And the idea that somebody is trying to lessen their taxes is something that the media would not grasp. So I figured they would just trash this guy. The next day, I'm in an area of LA called Sunland, which is primarily a white, blue-collar area. They're on business. And I went to a equivalent of the Denny's. It's called Coco's. They have a nice breakfast kind of we have here, hash brown, eggs, bacon, American breakfast. I'm sitting at the counter. A guy comes up to me and he said, "Are you Larry Elder? What are you doing here? I'm here on business. What did you think about Trump last night?" I said, "What did you think about Trump last night?" He said, "Speaks for me," walked away. That's interesting. I'm there about 35 minutes. Over the course of that half hour, 20 people came up to me. 2 or 3 of them were Hispanic. One even looked like he was Asian American. And they all said pretty much the same thing. This guy speaks for me. This guy is standing up for the little guy. We've been ignored. It's about time somebody paid attention to us. Over and over and over again. I said, wow. So I went on the air that night and I told the story. And I said, this man is connected with regular people to a degree I've never seen a Republican do. And I said, he's going to get the nomination and he's going to win. And people thought I was insane. Well, you know what happened. This man has done more in not quite 4 years than I've ever seen any president do in the same period. The man doesn't sleep. The man does not sleep. And this business about calling him a racist, are you kidding me? If he's a racist, he's a bad one. Needs to go back to racism school. Exhibit A for his racism is what? Charlottesville. Now, if the man is a racist, why is your biggest example a flat-out lie? I mean, it seems to me you ought to be able to reach over, pick up a rock, and say, here's an example, here's an example, here's an example. That's your number one example? The man was talking about the issue of whether or not there should be a Confederate monument in the public square. He even said specifically, quote, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. End of quote. Same press conference. Even Jake Tapper of CNN months later admitted that he was not talking about neo-Nazis. Michael Smerconish is a weekend host on CNN. He even admitted it, yet you still find people, including Joe Biden, going on CNN repeating the same lie. And nobody says anything. Nobody says, well, excuse me, my colleague Jake Tapper just analyzed this, and you're wrong, Mr. Vice President, but nobody says a word. It's stunning. I've lost 2 very good friends over Donald Trump, one of whom had a perfect score on his SAT. That's how brilliant this guy is. I've known him for over 40 years. My older brother and I were very close. My brother just died recently. I chose this man over my brother to be best man at my wedding. That's how close we were. He has a son with special needs. And he's absolutely convinced that Donald Trump, quote, mocked a handicapped reporter, end quote. Honestly, there's a website called Catholics for the number 4 Trump. Check it out. This gesture that Trump used, you might recall what happened. Trump just became president, and the media, of course, was scrutinizing everything he said, and Trump said something to the effect of that there were Muslims on 9/11 that were cheering the fall of the wall, of the towers. So, reporters scoured around trying to find the article that confirmed that, and nobody could find it. Donald Trump ultimately found some article written by a reporter that said people were cheering when the towers fell. So, Trump mentions it. They go to the reporter. Did you really see a number of people that were cheering when the Twin Towers fell? He goes, well, I'm not quite sure I saw that many. I wasn't sure if there were, I'm not sure. And then so Trump mocked him. And he said, well, I'm not sure, I don't remember. if you know the reporter, he does have a disability. It's an atrophied arm. He doesn't go like this. This is a gesture that Trump uses to mock a lot of people, including himself, including an able-bodied general. Once he asked him a question, the general, in his opinion, did not give a decisive answer, and Donald Trump went, well, then he went like this. It's a gesture that he often uses. So I sent my friend a 4-page letter, a link to Catholics for Trump. It didn't matter. And I learned something. Not about intelligence. If you hate this man and you want to hate him, you don't want to unhate him. So he didn't care. It didn't matter. And that's where we are in this country. I've never seen anything like it. What does he have to do? This is the best economic numbers for blacks in American history until the coronavirus thing happened. It's awfully tough to keep historically low unemployment. He signed the First Step Act. Why are people in the streets right now? Because they want criminal justice reform. Who's done more than that than Donald Trump? He signed the First Step Act. So far, that has allowed about 5,000 mostly black men to have their long sentences reconsidered and reduced an average of about 75 months. 2,000 to 3,000 of them have been released altogether. He signed the Music Modernization Act. People have forgotten about that. That is allowing a lot of performers, many of whom were black, to finally get money for digital downloads. There is a video that I've done on YouTube. Right now, it's got about 2.4 million hits about all the things Donald Trump has done for black people. And there's a segment in there where Sam and Dave, the survivor, I'm not sure whether Sam or Dave survived, one of them survived, and he came there and he talked about how many people were going to be benefited by this. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. For the first time, Donald Trump has put the funding for historically black colleges on automatic pilots for the next 10 years. They don't have to go back and knock on the door again and get more money from Congress. He is doing something about illegal immigration. What does it have to do with black people? George Borjas is a Harvard economist who's probably done more work on the impact of legal and illegal immigration than anybody else. And he said there are winners and losers behind illegal immigration. Obviously, one big winner would be the illegals themselves. The other winner would be the employers who hire them and pay them less money than they otherwise would be paying American workers. Big loser? Unskilled black and brown workers living in the inner city who have to compete for jobs that they would otherwise hold. And because of the availability of illegal alien labor, it puts downward pressure on their wages to the tune of almost $2,000 a year, every single year. And Donald Trump is doing something about this. And perhaps more important than anything else, in my opinion, Donald Trump wants to provide parents with the opportunity to have choice in school. There was a movie some years ago called Boys in the Hood, maybe some of you saw it. And the high school around which the movie centered was called Crenshaw High School in South Central Los Angeles. That's where I went to school. Front page article, LA Times, 3% of kids at my former high school can do math at grade level. 3%, not a typo. And it is a Crip school, meaning the Crips run the school. I know that the gangs weren't there when I was there. They happened several years later. The reason I know that is because Ice-T, the rapper, chose to go to Crenshaw because he wanted to go to a Crip school. Now, you are a Philadelphia public school teacher. 44% of Philadelphia public school teachers with school-age kids have their own kids in private school, as opposed to 10% of the average American family. 6% black families have their own kids in private school. 44% of Philadelphia public school teachers have their own school-age kids in private school. 39% of Chicago public school teachers have their own kids in private schools. Now, what is that? That's the equivalent of opening up a restaurant, putting up a sign saying, come on in, just don't eat the food. There are 13 public high schools in Baltimore where 0% of kids can do math at grade level. And another half a dozen where 1% can. That's half the public schools in the city of Baltimore. And you are a parent living within a geographical radius of that school, one of those schools. The Democrat Party is mandating that you send your child there whether you want to or not, whether it's violent or not, whether the learning curve is low or practically non-existent or not. And one party wants to give that parent an option out. That alone ought to cause black people to rethink their historical allegiance to the Democratic Party. That alone. Please explain to me how it is Donald Trump's fault all this violence in the streets. Donald Trump has created an atmosphere in America so that there's kind of racial tension. That's why we're in the streets. Really? The city that of over 100,000 that voted most for Donald Trump, Abilene, Texas. The city is about 140 years old. Guess which city voted for its first black mayor? Abilene, Texas. Now, how is it that Donald Trump's sending a racist dog whistle to his racist supporters, and then they turn around and vote for a black guy? Explain that to me. It's ridiculous. And this is what this man has been charged with. The issue of systemic racism. I was on TMZ a couple of days ago. I don't know if anybody saw my exchange. It's an 8-minute exchange. I think you'll find it entertaining. I was on to talk about my being on this commission. Harvey Levin is the owner of TMZ. He's a lawyer, went to the University of Chicago, very smart guy, and he has a co-host named Charles. And all of a sudden, it went from me being congratulated being on this commission to how could you work for somebody who doesn't believe in systemic racism? He believes, Harvey does, that if you deny systemic racism, essentially you're a racist. I said, Harvey, what's your evidence? Well, I mean, everybody, I said, what's your evidence? I said, there's a black Harvard economist named Roland Fryer, Harvard. Harvard is the oldest college in America. This man became a tenured professor faster than anybody else. That's how bright he is. I said he's black. And he just knew, because of all the high-profile deaths of Freddie Gray and Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, that clearly the police were engaging in excessive brutality against black people just because they were black. And he was shocked to find out nobody had ever done a study to confirm it. So he thought he would do it. He said the results were the most shocking of my professional career. Not only did I not find any pattern of systemic racism, I found the police were more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. Shocking. However, that same research has been duplicated other places. There's some researchers at Washington State, over 3 different surveys over a number of years, they found the same thing. No pattern of racism, no pattern of systemic racism, but a huge pattern of refusing or failing to pull the trigger on a black suspect and a white suspect for fear of being called a racist. It's not like the government has not been interested in this issue. Since the 90s, there's something called the Police Public Contact Survey the FBI does. Every 3 years, they ask 60,000 Americans, not a small sample, 60,000 Americans, have you had any interaction with the police in the last year? If the answer is yes, series of questions. How were you treated? What did they say to you? You touched? Were you abused? No pattern whatsoever. It is simply not there. But the Democrats want you to believe it's there. Why? Because in order to get 95% of one group, black people, to vote one way, you have to malign the other side. Accuse the other side of being racist. Accuse them of being indifferent about racism. Accuse them of engaging in systemic racism. And that is what the Democrats and the media have been doing, and it's a lie. Racism has never been a more insignificant factor in American life than today. How do you explain Barack Obama? Please. Barack? Couldn't even pronounce it. Obama? Hussein is his middle name, from Hawaii? He knocks off Hillary? The best funded candidate probably in the history of this country? And we're talking about systemic racism? Before the man became president, he's on 60 Minutes and he's being interviewed by Steve Croft. I never will forget this. I was by myself, and I don't normally watch 60 Minutes, but I wanted to see this guy because I did see him in Boston when he gave that speech when he was introducing John Kerry. There's no blue America, there's no red America, there's just one America, yeah! And I had my producer next to me and I said, this guy didn't say anything that anybody else couldn't have said, but he said it well, people went nuts. This guy's gonna run for president someday, he's probably gonna get elected. And of course that's what happened. So I'm watching 60 Minutes, and Steve Cross says to him, Senator, if you don't get the nomination, will it be because of racism? And I said, let's see what this guy says. And I leaned back and he said something that I would have said. He said, no. If I don't get the nomination, it will be because I have failed to articulate a vision that the American people can embrace. I said, hallelujah. I don't vote for tax, spend, regulate Democrats. I don't care who they are, what color they are, but at least this guy is not what I call a victocrat. What happened? First opportunity the man had to straighten things out in this country was when his good friend, the Harvard professor Skip Gates, got arrested, someone called 911 because he came back from vacation and forgot his door key. So he broke into his own house with his dryer. A neighbor saw it, called 911. Don't you want neighbors like that? Police show up. Man very politely sees this man inside the house, doesn't know whether he belongs to the house. We politely asked him to come out, show ID. And rather than do that, this Harvard tenured black professor said, I'll come out if your mama tells me to come out. He gets briefly arrested. This is big thing. Obama comes out and says, and I quote, the Cambridge police acted stupidly. No, they didn't. They acted perfectly reasonably. What Obama should have said was this. Last night I had a talk with my good friend Skip Gates, who I've known him a long time. And I said, Skip, we have a real problem in this country with a lot of young black men not complying when cops pull them over. You're not helping anything by essentially telling people don't comply when the cops properly, lawfully ask you for a legal question, make a legal request of you. And I told my friend Skip, I'm going to go public, and I'm going to tell the world that I told you that you, as a role model, failed. That you should have done a far better job, and people would have then followed your lead, and some of this strife that we have would have been minimized. He did the opposite. Then we have, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon, whatever the hell that means. Don't tell Michelle. There's this place called Ferguson, Obama said when addressing the United Nations. A place called Ferguson. As you know, the whole thing turned out to be a lie. Michael Brown did not have his hands up, did not say don't shoot. They did a full investigation. The officer was completely exonerated, but the Obama administration said that the Ferguson PD was guilty of institutional racism. Why? Well, Ferguson is 67% black, but 85% of those who are stopped in traffic stops are black. And 18-point discrepancy, ergo, racism. Okay. New York is what, 25% black? Of those who are stopped in traffic stops, 55% of them are black. That's a 30-point gap. So isn't, by definition, the NYPD more institutionally racist than the Ferguson PD, which is almost all white? The NYPD, the majority of the officers, street officers, are people of color. So if you're just going to do it based on those numbers, then also NYPD should be racist too. It's ridiculous. You have to do it based upon behavior. During the Obama administration in 2013, a study came out called Race and Traffic Stops, put out by the National Institute of Justice, which is the research arm of the DOJ. And they looked at traffic stops, and they said it is true that blacks are disproportionately stopped compared to white people. It is also true that blacks disproportionately break the law compared to white people. If speeding, a black motorist is more likely to speed. Driving without a seatbelt, black motorist is more likely to do that. Driving without a car seat in the back if you have a kid, black motorist is more likely to do that. So ultimately, the report said the reason for the discrepancy is because of, quote, legitimate factors, end of quote. It's interesting, I'm called Uncle Tom when I say this kind of stuff on the air. And I always say to people, wouldn't you prefer me to be right? I mean, you may not be happy about black people being disproportionately stopped, but isn't it preferable that the reason has nothing to do with racism? Why are you mad at me? Why are you angry at me? So I told Harvey this. I said, Harvey, what's your evidence? What's your evidence? I told him about all these studies, one after another. He said, and I quote, Larry, you are using statistics. I am using humanity. WT, you know what? Don't confuse me with the facts. I don't want to hear this. I have an anecdote that I want to use. Why do you suppose we do studies? What's the point? It is not true, it's a lie. And I said, Harvey, and this is when he really got upset with me. I said, Harvey, you should be ashamed of yourself. You're advancing a phony, fake narrative that is getting people killed. How? The police pull back. It's called the Ferguson effect. That's what happened outside of Ferguson. Police pull back. Why would you be proactive? What's the upside of being proactive? You see something going on, looks a little suspicious, I'm going to go and find out what that is. What's the point? You're going to be accused of being a racist? Who knows what might happen? Civilians might jump in on you because there's a great deal of disrespect now for cops. So cops are just driving by and they'll do a 911 call. That's it. Crime went up in Baltimore, crime went up in Chicago, crime went up outside in St. Louis, outside of Ferguson, because of the Ferguson effect. The other thing that happens, you are basically encouraging young black men to resist a lawful command. If, in fact, it is true, because of what you've been told by Obama, by Eric Holder, by the Democrats, by the media, that cops engage in institutional racism, systemic racism, structural racism, why should I cooperate? This guy's a villain. And so you're making things worse on both sides of the transaction. And you're causing crime to go up, and the people who are hurt by the crime, of course, are the very same people you claim you care about. Knock it off. 1997, Time Magazine, CNN, together, these two big organizations did a study where they interviewed black teenagers and white teenagers on racism. Is racism a major problem in America? 1997, now 23 years ago, and both of them said yes. But black teenagers were asked, is racism a big problem, a major problem, or a minor problem in your own daily life? 89% said no problem or minor problem in my own daily life. That was 23 years ago, before Obama got elected, before Obama got reelected. In fact, in 1997, more black teens than white teens said failure to take advantage of available opportunities is a bigger problem than racism. 1997, 23 years ago. Knock it off. There are two big think tanks, on the left and on the right. The left is the Brookings Institution, probably the most prominent think tank. On the right, you have one like the American Enterprise Institute, very prominent. And they both said the same thing that you have to do in order to escape poverty. Finish high school. Don't have a kid until you get married. Get a job, keep the job, don't quit the job to get another job. You will not be poor. And they didn't say that only applies to white people. This is a country where you can go from nothing to something faster than anybody else, anywhere else in all human history. And to walk around and act as if you are oppressed, it is offensive to me, to all the men and women who worked and struggled when there was real systemic racism, real oppression in America. My father is from Athens, Georgia. My father was called a nigger in open court once when he tried to get a license to operate a cab. My father told me when he walked down the road, if he was by himself and there was another white kid coming this way, no fight. If he's by himself, two white kids, a fight. If he's with another friend and two white kids this way, no fight. Three white kids, two of him, a fight. Can you imagine? Every day, every day, every day. Bob Gibson, the great St. Louis Cardinal, just died. He talked about racism affecting his entire life growing up. He said it wasn't just occasional, it was everywhere, everything. He said even during the first part of my career. And now, somebody like Barack Obama got a higher percentage of the white vote than John Kerry? And we're talking about the same thing? About choice in school, I'm going to say something else too. Barack Obama was living in Indonesia. His mom married an oil company executive after she divorced her first husband, assuming they were ever married. I wasn't quite sure about that. And he was an oil company executive, and there was a private school for the oil company executives. Obama's mom felt the school wasn't good enough. She sent him back to Hawaii to live with his white grandparents so he could get a better education. He went to Punahou High School, which is the finest prep school in the whole state of Hawaii, private. He then goes to Occidental in California, LA, which is also an elite private school, 2 years. Finishes up at Columbia, private school. Goes to Harvard, private school. Michelle, true, she went to a public school in Chicago. However, the local school was deemed to be inferior by her family, put her on a bus, so she went to a much better school outside of the area. We would call that school choice today. She then goes to Princeton, then goes to Harvard. The girls went to a private school that was run by University of Chicago for faculty members because Obama was a law school faculty member. Then they go to DC, Sidwell Friends, which is where Chelsea went, 40 grand a year. They never set foot in public school with denying other inner city parents the same rights. It really, really bothers. Donald Trump has done something that no other president ever did, even though they promised it, to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. One of the first things that the Obama administration did was chastise Israel for building so-called settlements. And every time there was some sort of conflict, what did John Kerry and the others say? Well, we don't want Israel to respond disproportionately. You don't hear that kind of rhetoric from this administration at all anymore. And what's happened? It's jump-started a whole different conversation in the Middle East that has led to normalizing relations between Israel and UAE, Israel and Bahrain, Israel and Sudan, and there may be others. And if you're watching CNN and MSNBC, which is what I call it, it is probable or possible you wouldn't even know about this. what big tech has done to suppress the Hunter Biden story? It ought to shock even people on the left. And even principled people on the left, like Glenn Greenwald, who founded the magazine called The Intercept. He quit his own magazine because they wouldn't publish the NYPD, the New York Post story. New York Post is 200 years old. Founded by one of the founding fathers. And it was deemed to be too unreliable to publish. And Twitter admitted that they suppressed the story. Facebook suppressed it. Google suppressed it. This is what we're up against. This is what we're up against. Out of all the newspapers in America, I think 2 supported Donald Trump. One of them was a newspaper owned by Adelson in Las Vegas, and for sure doesn't count. So maybe 1. Hillary had over 50 newspapers supporting her. Virtually no congresspersons and senators supported Donald Trump when he ran the first time. And the man still managed to win. Absolutely incredible. And I'm looking for another hit this time. And believe me, if he wins this time, it's going to be mass suicide on the part of the left. They won't know what to do.
That's a little psychotic, and we'll clap for that.
Hate him with a passion I have never seen before.
That's good.
I grew up with 2 brothers. We didn't have a sister. My mother had a friend living in the South whose daughter came to California to go to Cal State, and so my mother asked her to move in with us. She lived with us for about 4 or 5 years. It was fascinating to have a sister. Watching her put on makeup, go on dates, it was just fascinating. And she had a boyfriend named Don, and we loved Don. Don was athletic, he was gorgeous, he was a swimmer, he was a weightlifter. He took us to see the Dodgers, he took us to the park, he took us to lots of places where my father didn't, because my father was always working. We loved Don. And I was talking about Don, I'm like 12 or 13 years old, talking about Don with my mom, and I said something about Don being handsome on my way to make another point. And she went, "Wait, you think Don is handsome?" And I said, "Mom, Judy up the street, she comes up with some sort of excuse to come out of the house every time Don comes over. Linda across the street starts cutting the lawn. She never does that. Shelly down the street gets the balls, starts washing the car when he's out. He never does that. He looks like Sidney Poitier in his prime." And she goes, "I don't see it." Now my mom, I know my mom, like everybody knows her mother, and she was being completely honest. And I went, "Mom, you don't like him, do you?" And she said, "No, I don't." And I said, "Mother, your contempt for him is causing you not to be able to see him the way everybody else does. That's on you. This is a good-looking man." I don't see it. And this is the attitude I have about Trump. Doesn't matter. There's something about him. I don't like his style. I don't like his rudeness. I don't like his curtness. That's what I like about it, by the way. And so, all the people who feel that way, I say this, I'm going to leave it this way. I love sports, and I like golf, even though I'm not a very good golfer. And one day I'm watching the Golf Channel, and the host says to these 2 very experienced golfers, "How can you tell if somebody's a good golfer?" And the first golfer said, "Well, I look to see where he positions his feet. I look to see if he's right-handed, does he keep his right or left arm locked as he swings? Does he keep his eye on the ball?" I went through this very detailed, beautiful, eloquent description of what makes a good golfer. The other one went like this. "I look to see where the ball lands. I like where the ball is landing. May God bless you. May God bless